Today we take a look at the Vancouver Canucks. Our general manager Jim Benning and Travis Green both on a hot seat. Will we see significant changes after a very poor start to the season? We're also taking a look at some trade rumors focusing on the Leafs, the Penguins, as well as the Anaheim Ducks. We also got news today that the Senators have been shut down due to their COVID outbreak, a whole bunch of injury updates and news on the waiver wire. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. Let's kick things off with the bigger part of the news that started today from the NHL shutting down the Ottawa Senators, which to me came a little bit too late, but at least they've finally done it. They have postponed their next 3 games for the Senators, which puts them returning at the earliest November the 20th. We'll see how the next few days go. If they don't get any more positive cases and they can start to get some of their players out of protocol that have been dealing with this for a while, then they should be able to return that day. But depending on how things look, it's possible we could even see a further extension of that postponement. We'll see. And the other thing too that's significant about this is that opens the door to a possibility of the NHL pulling out of the Olympic Games. Now, of course, we know that the NHL and the NHLPA had an agreement for the players to go, but there was also an agreement that the NHL has the right to pull out of this agreement due to scheduling conflicts if they have to postpone too many games due to COVID outbreak. So we'll have to see what happens here. Obviously, this is one team, but we also saw a situation where we have a new case on the Golden Knights team today. I believe it was William Carrier. Now, everything started for the Senators after returning from a 3-game road trip from the United States, the first U.S. road trip in almost 2 years. They came back, and that's when the cases started happening. So clearly, they picked something up as a team. That's where the virus, during that trip somewhere, that's where it kind of got started. And Vegas was one of their first opponents after returning. We know what the life of the virus and how everything works. It can take up to 2 weeks to start showing your symptoms. So we'll have to see where things go. But, I think letting them play as long as it did and exposing them to as many teams as they did could have more harm done than good. But at the same time, I understand they want to keep going. They don't want scheduling, issues and postponements. And, they really don't want to pull out of the Olympic Games. But if they need the calendar to fulfill the schedule, that is a real possibility we could be looking at here. But of course, some might make the argument that maybe instead of going for an 82-game schedule, knowing that COVID was still at least partially an issue this year, hopefully not as much as the last year and a bit, but still there, and it could still happen that maybe they should have went with a slightly condensed schedule, maybe 60-some games or something like that. But it is what it is. This is where we're at. The Sens are the first outbreak that's gotten shut down. At least we've seen other teams deal with COVID outbreaks, but not to this point. We've seen some teams have I think 6 or 7 players out. The Sens have actually had 10 players, a coach, and then on top of that, have 4 players out with significant injuries, including Colin White, Shane Pinto, Eric Brandstrom as well. They've been dealing with a lot of adversity here, and if their seasons are right off because of it, it wouldn't be super shocking, but we'll see where this goes, and hopefully it doesn't impact the Olympics, but time will tell depending on how much it spreads throughout the NHL and the league here. Now on to some waivers news. We got word today that the St. Louis Blues have placed veteran forward Kyle Clifford on waivers, so he very well could be claimed. He's only played in 2 games this year. He put up 1 assist, so he's been a healthy scratch. A big chunk of the time. Clifford's only on a 1-year deal, making $1 million. He has a lot of experience. He's got Stanley Cups from his time as being a Los Angeles King. And just kind of fell out of favor with the Blues. Hasn't been able to get into the lineup. But this is also a move by St. Louis to accomplish other things. This isn't just about saying Clifford doesn't fit here, let's see if somebody will pick him up. That's part of it, but not nearly the bigger picture here. They really want to call up young defenseman Scott Perunovich, of course, who has been the top player, arguably, in the American Hockey League this year. He looks like a real stud prospect. I'm not sure he'll become a stud NHL defenseman just yet. Time will tell. He does have that potential, though, and he's playing like it at the AHL level, that they felt they needed to get him into some NHL games. So to do this, they had to jump through some cap gymnastics, which had required them sending down goaltender Joel Hofer, as well as Joshua and Rosen, all down to the minors to get the space necessary to bring him up. Because to bring him up, not only do you have to factor in his entry-level contract, but you also have to factor in the potential bonuses that are built into his contract as well. So they needed around $2 million in cap space to bring him up. Now, the other part of this too, it wasn't just about bringing him into the picture, because they were able to do that with the 3 players they sent down to the minors, but they also want to get themselves out of long-term injury reserve. They're like many teams in LTIR to be cap compliant this year. Obviously, they've, like many teams, have had players on the injuries that have been out longer term, so they can take advantage of this, but it's not ideal. They really want to be out of that so they can begin accruing cap space that they can later use later into the season if they want to make other upgrades. Makes life a lot easier. To do that, they had to clear out an additional just over $900,000 in salary. Well, Clifford makes $1 million. He's barely playing, so it makes sense. If they put him through waivers, he gets claimed. Well, that's $1 million off the books. They're now out of LTIR and totally cap compliant. If he doesn't get claimed, they can be demoted to the minors, and that salary is small enough it can be completely buried. They'd get the relief, and they can then go from there. So I wouldn't be shocked if Clifford is claimed, though, given the fact that he's got Stanley Cups. He can play a physical game, be a good, bottom 6 player. Maybe LA takes him back. Hard to say. Of course, he had a quick stint in Toronto as well. He was part of that Jack Campbell trade going to the Leafs. So we'll see where that goes, but Clifford is on waivers, but it'll also accomplish, like I said, a lot for the Blues when it comes to their cap space. When it comes to some injury news, we saw another situation with PK Subban. I know some people are calling it another slew foot, another bad trip, and I can understand where he's coming from. When you play like PK has this year, and you've had, I think, 2 or 3 other incidents, you start to lose the benefit of the doubt. I'm not 100% convinced he went in there with intent, but to me, he takes such a wide stance, makes himself wide, that he gets that leg sticking out, and I think that's a lot of the issues here. But either way, Sammy Blais, the Rangers, the latest victim in the PK situation here, he went down and didn't look good. We haven't had an official update from the Rangers, but it's got to be like some kind of leg or knee injury, and it looks like it's going to be longer term, but we don't have an official time frame on him. Haven't seen anything from player safety on that either, so I'm not sure that anything is coming for Subban. The Avalanche have confirmed that JT Compher will be out for about a month. We already discussed a few days ago that he was out with an upper body injury. Now we know the approximate timeline. Flyers defenseman Ryan Ellis has been back on injured reserve and is now considered week to week after re-injuring himself on the weekend. So we'll see where that goes. That's certainly a blow for the Flyers. Jake Allen's also day-to-day for the Habs. Of course, had a collision in goal with the Red Wings in the Red Wings game on the weekend as well, where he completely got run over by Dylan Larkin. But to me, that was another situation where the defenseman, which I believe was Jeff Petrie, really, to me, that was more his fault than Larkin's. But either way, it's unfortunate it happened, and Allen really got his bell rung pretty good. So I would imagine their main thing they're concerned about here is concussion. So we'll see. They haven't confirmed that he has one, but you have to think that it's a real possibility considering how hard he's been hit. Now, before we jump into the rest of the video, I do want to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. And guess what? Hockey fans are buzzing because hockey is back. Want to know what else is buzzing? The Lawnmower 4.0 from our friends at Manscaped, who are the global leaders in male grooming, trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. I highly recommend the Performance Package 4.0, which includes their new state-of-the-art Lawnmower 4.0, as well as some other great features. The lawnmower itself has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multifunction switch that can engage as a travel lock, gives you the ability to turn on an LED spotlight as well for a more precise shave. Also, as I mentioned on numerous occasions before, Manscaped is about much more than just a trimmer. They have everything, all aspects covered in male grooming, including some great formulations like their brand new ultra premium body wash to keep you smelling great all day long. It's certainly a big hit here. I absolutely love it. They also have other exfoliators and gels to keep all aspects of your grooming needs covered. I highly recommend you check out manscaped.com. Use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using promo code TSH. So thanks very much for watching that promotional content. I do greatly appreciate it. Now, of course, on to the rest of the video. I want to talk about the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks are a team getting a lot of headlines here. It started on the weekend with Jeff Merrick on the 32 Thoughts segment of Hockey Night in Canada talking about the fact that owner Francisco Aquilini was going to be on their recent 2-game road trip. Although they assured everybody it was a pre-planned thing, it wasn't like he was jumping in at the last minute to try to see what was going on due to the team struggling. But you got to wonder sometimes how much truth there is to those kinds of statements. But we'll go on the fact that it is true just to say that it was, because I can't prove that it wasn't, of course. And of course, they saw 2 more really bad losses because of how the Canucks played. The team doesn't even look engaged at this point. JT Miller's been okay. Demko has played relatively well considering what he's been able to do with the lackluster team in front of him. But Pettersson has been quiet. Besser, like a lot of the top players just are not being the top players. And somebody summarized this best today. Your top players are playing at their best. That oftentimes covers up other weaknesses on the team, and when you're not getting that, it exposes them, and we're seeing that right now, that the top guys are not playing like it at all, not contributing the way they need to help this team be successful. You have to wonder, but the futures of Jim Benning and Travis Green is what was discussed on the Hockey Night in Canada segment. Merrick seems to think it's more likely that Benning would be in trouble more than Green, given the fact that Green just signed a 2-year extension, so he has the rest of this year, which is still early in the season, and all of next year. He's not sure that Aquilini would want to pay him, to not work for them again, right? But, meanwhile, where Benning has been there for 8 years and has basically been in a rebuild the entire time. I mean, I know the last couple of years you could say the Canucks are coming out of the rebuild and going more into competitive mode, but after this offseason and all the moves that they made, the goal was to really take it a step forward. I mean, it started a couple of years back with the bubble playoffs. They get in, made some noise. They showed the team could be competitive. And then, of course, last year, they wanted to take some steps. And then, of course, this past offseason, they wanted to continue that on. And they made some significant changes, bringing in OEL and Garland, and a whole bunch of other things. Tucker Pullman on defense. They Markstrom, of course, left town last year too. There's been a significant turnover in the past year or so with that team, with a lot of guys coming in. And at this point, it's just not working out. I mean, at this point, you can't say this roster can truly contend. And to me, that's more on the GM than it is the coach. Now, what are things like in that room and how the players-coach interaction? I can't speak to that. You have to think to a degree there could be issues there as well, given the fact that the team just, like I said, you can't say they're not trying, but it looks like they're not engaged and that the effort level is just not where it needs to be. So you have to think there's a possibility they could both be in trouble. But I wouldn't be shocked if they do make a change, that it's more like Benning, let the new GM come in, make those decisions on personnel when it comes to players, and the coach is Green the guy longer term, or do they have to go in a different direction? They might need a more different kind of style of coach who can play more of an up-tempo game, really focus more on the offense because they have those elite offensive players, but they're not getting the production there, right? So you have to think Elias Pettersson, who signed a bridge deal and basically said publicly that he's doing that because he wanted to be convinced that the team was going to win longer term before he'd commit longer. He's kind of, proven something here that, at this point, the team's not looking good. So you have to be concerned about what he's thinking, but at the same time, you're concerned about his game too, right? So it's just hard to say. It's just a mess at the end of the day in Vancouver. They need something. Many thought there could be an announcement coming anytime as early as today that either Green, Benning, both, or something was going to happen, and that the ownership was going to make a change of some sort. As I record this, at least about 6:30 Eastern time, nothing has come out as of yet, but we'll see. But I do think there's real changes coming. Wouldn't be shocking if Benning tries to make a trade maybe to try to save his job, shake things up. Will he be able to buy himself some time? That's possible. We'll see. Will he do something significant? I mean, there's only so much he can do with this roster based on their contracts. Would he do like a Brock Besser or Bo Horvat or, one of the guys that doesn't have a ton of term? I don't know what, I'm not suggesting he should. I'm just saying, you got to look at the roster and say what would be potentially, able to be moved. And obviously there's certain guys you're not going to want to part with too. So I'm just not sure how you can really do a big shakeup without doing something significant. So we'll see where this goes, but they're going to be a very interesting team to watch here in the short term. When it comes to the Pens, there is word as well that they are goalie shopping again, but not so much for Tristan Jarry this time. That was last year. He's actually doing a little bit better, but it's more of a backup situation where Casey DeSmith isn't getting the job done. We've seen the Pens also be linked to maybe wanting to add on the blue line with Justin Hall's name continually coming up out of Toronto as potentially being a good fit. I've seen multiple media outlets suggesting Hall for either like Casey DeSmith or Louis Domingue, something like some sort of trade like that. I mean, the Leafs, of course, have battled with Peter Mrazek being injured a lot this year. They do have Hutchison as a number 3, but would they want to make an upgrade in that regard? Or do they feel like they could with Domingue or DeSmith being one of those guys? I'm not 100% sure that would be, something right up their alley. Maybe it's separate deals, but at the end of the day, I can see the Penguins, going after a goaltender. I mean, and whether or not it's, I don't think it'd be anybody too high profile, though. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. It'd be a wonderful story to get Fleury back in Pittsburgh. I don't see that happening really soon. I mean, later in the year, if the Penguins got things turned around and they were able to go on or at least they thought they could go on a playoff run if Chicago was out of it, I could see that maybe happening. But if it does happen, I think it's more likely to happen in the offseason because Fleury would be a free agent and they'd have more options at that point in time. But certainly watch the Penguins when it comes to goaltending and the blue line. Another piece from the 32 Thoughts segment that was interesting was the situation with the Dallas Stars, who up until their game against the Flyers had not had a regulation victory yet this season. Of course, as I mentioned, they're a team that 2 years back in the bubble playoffs went to the Stanley Cup final, and expectations were high after that. To me, I think you could watch this team and look at their roster and know that it probably wasn't going to be that easy to repeat. Same thing with the Habs last year. Like, you can have teams go to the finals. It doesn't mean you're going to be a perennial Stanley Cup contender. But sometimes the expectations and ownership level get so high that it can get blinders on and hard to see. But Dallas certainly, like I said, didn't have a great start to the year. We saw a situation where head coach Rick Bowness recently had like a 29-second media availability, and all he really said was, "We know what's wrong and we're going to fix it." And then after they announced that assistant coach John Stevens has been removed from the bench and put up in the eye in the sky position up top. So maybe Merrick suggested that could there be a conflict between Stevens and some of the players? It's really difficult to say, but we don't think, based on what we've heard here, that that's the only move that the Stars are trying to consider making here. Of course, they later put some veteran guys like Hero and Como on waivers, so they're in the midst of kind of trying to shuffle the deck there and do something different. They have a plethora of goaltenders, so I wouldn't be shocked if either Holtby or Hudobin were to be moved so they can get more playing time for Ottinger. And of course, there's still Ben Bishop. I don't know what his status is. There's not a lot of chatter about Bishop and if he's going to play again or where things are at with him. But still, either way, very interesting times in Dallas. You have to think maybe a trade or some sort of other shakeup is coming in that regard as well. And lastly, I want to touch on the Anaheim Ducks. Now, this is a team that's been one of the top surprising, for a good reason, team to start the NHL season. We've seen some rejuvenated players like Getzlaf. Troy Terry's tearing it up, having a career start to his season. But I read an interesting article from NBC Sports and James O'Brien suggesting that the hot start for the Ducks might be a good reason for them to trade goalie John Gibson. Now, this might seem kind of counterproductive to what's going on there, and you could probably make an argument to both sides. The way the Ducks are playing right now, you would have to think they'd stand a really good chance to make the playoffs. I guess you have to see, is this sustainable? Now, if the Ducks go down this road, to me, there's no way they're going to do this anytime soon. Would they do it near the deadline if they're out of it? It's a possibility. John Gibson's been a goaltender who's having a bit of a resurgence this year, and a lot of that might have to do with the fact that he really wants to be on the U.S. Olympic team as well, and certainly has some extra motivation, you could say, which is fine. But at the same time here for the Ducks, they're not going to move a key piece like Gibson when they're playing extremely well. We have a lot of time between now and the deadline. If this keeps up and they're going to be a playoff team, I would suspect you're not going to see a lot of moves out of the Ducks. I wouldn't think they'd go making much of in the way of additions either, because they're not going to want to mortgage the future for, potentially minor upgrades at the deadline. But at the same time, Gibson is a player. It does make sense sometimes like that to sell while the value is high, right? You got to do your, don't want to take a player and keep them too long and then you get nothing in return. At the end of the day, as much as, they're obviously people, you want to be loyal to them. It is a business and you have to manage them like assets, because that's essentially, from the business side of things, what they are. And there would be a big return for Gibson, which would certainly help propel them into the future, with now that they're seeing more growth from some of the younger players that are, obviously propelling all this early season success. So will the Ducks trade Gibson? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to, but I wouldn't rule it out completely. But this is something that I think we could revisit later in the season if they fall back and start performing the way a lot of us thought they would going into the regular season. But I just wanted to bring it up as a potential interesting topic to follow here, as, selling high while the value is good on an asset does make sense, but you just don't see NHL teams doing that when they're, on their way to a playoff spot. So let me know your thoughts, everything down below, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.